In a remote village, lost among dense forests and swamps, there lived a simple man named John. His family was poor but honest. The neighbors always spoke of them with respect, though they often noticed something strange about John's house, especially at night. The village was surrounded by thick forests, through which no road passed. The locals believed these forests were cursed, and deep within them lived mysterious creatures that no one had seen but everyone knew about. It was said that at night something roamed the woods, capable of taking a person away forever. No one who dared to enter these woods after sunset ever returned. One night, when the moon was hidden behind clouds, John heard a strange knock at the window. It was the dead of night, when the entire village was asleep. John was not superstitious, but the sound made him uneasy. He got out of bed, walked over to the window, and cautiously pulled back the curtain. Outside stood a girl, about 10 years old, with long, loose hair, dressed in an old gown that looked more like a shroud. Her eyes seemed empty, and the sight sent a chill down John's spine. He opened the window and asked what she was doing there at night. The girl silently pointed toward the forest, then just as quietly turned and walked toward it, disappearing into the mist. John was frightened but couldn't leave the child in danger. He threw on his cloak, grabbed a lantern, and set off after her. The village was quiet, with only the creaking of old trees breaking the dead silence. As John approached the forest, the mist grew thicker, and it seemed to have a life of its own, as though unseen eyes were watching his every step. John took several steps into the forest when he suddenly heard a voice. It was a quiet but clear whisper coming from deep within the trees. The voice called him by name, but there was something strange in its tone that made his blood run cold. Looking around, John noticed that the trees here were much taller and thicker than those at the edge of the forest, and their roots twisted together like a tangled web. The ground beneath his feet became soft, and each step echoed heavily. He suddenly realized that he hadn't seen the girl for some time and began to doubt that she had ever existed. Suddenly, the lantern went out, and John was left in complete darkness. He felt the air grow heavy and suffocating, and the silence pressed on his ears. His attempts to relight the lantern were in vain. And then he heard the same footsteps he had heard earlier in the distance, but now they were getting closer. John froze in place, feeling the footsteps approach. He tried to convince himself that it was just his imagination, that the girl, the mist, and the forest were merely products of a tired mind. But the sound of the footsteps was too real, and each new step drew nearer. When the footsteps stopped, John felt that someone or something was standing right behind him. His breath caught in his throat, and he didn't dare turn around. At that moment, something cold touched his neck. He spun around sharply, but there was no one there, only the dense mist, which seemed to be lurking, waiting. John's strength was leaving him, and fear gripped every part of his body. And then he heard the girl's voice again, this time much closer. The voice whispered to him, "Follow me, you must see this." John felt his strength ebbing away as if he were in a trance, and, without knowing why, he took a step forward, following the ghostly voice. Through the thick mist, he finally saw the girl again. She was standing by an old, moss-covered stone that looked like an ancient altar. John couldn't understand what this place was, but he felt that something terrible had happened here. The girl turned to him and said, "They've been waiting for you." At that moment, the ground beneath him began to move. From beneath the old roots and stones, hands started to emerge, bloodless, with dried-up skin, reaching out to John as if they wanted to drag him into the depths of the earth. In horror, John tried to retreat, but it was too late. His feet seemed rooted to the ground. The girl approached him closely and, looking at him with her empty eyes, whispered, "You will never leave this forest. You belong to it." The last thing he saw before he was pulled into the earth was the girl's eyes, which suddenly flashed with a terrifying glee. In the morning, when the sun rose over the forest, the villagers found John's house empty. His tracks disappeared into the forest, but no one dared to search for him. The legend of the cursed forest was revived among the people, and from that time on, no one risked entering the woods at night. It was believed that in the mist, one might encounter something that would take them away forever. Ever since then, whenever the mist rolled in, the villagers would close their windows and doors, remembering John's story. For no one knew what really happened in that forest, but everyone sensed that the mist brought with it something ancient and malevolent. And the girl who had led John into the forest never appeared again. But people said that sometimes, in the dead of night, one could hear her quiet whisper coming from the depths of the mist and see a shadow slipping among the trees. And that was always a bad sign.